Final Fantasy X has always been one of the easiest Final Fantasy games to speedrun. Albeit long, it's a speedrun where all you really need to do is follow a script and you can't go wrong. Even with modern breakthroughs such as being able to track the RNG, the run has slowly become harder and harder at the top level without affecting the barrier to entry too much for new runners. Amongst all the discoveries made though, one change caused one of the most inconsequential fights in the speedrun to become a massive turning point that added a great deal of complexity for new runners, and that fight is Biran and Yenke.
Biran rend you asunder! Hardness! Hardness!
This used to be a simple fight. As long as you didn't get hit by an unlucky 1 in 64 chance, you could continue without any trouble. However, some years ago, the strategies changed so much that this one fight made the route go from a simple straight line into a much more complicated road with multiple branching pathways. To explain how this happened, first we need to talk about blitzball. Wrong game! Go back! Go back! That's more like it. In Final Fantasy X, players are forced into a game of blitzball against a strong team called the Luca Goers, and as a reward for winning, they get a strength sphere. The strength sphere can be placed into any empty node to turn it into a strength +4 node, which is a very sizable boost to physical damage. This item is extremely useful for speedrunners, but while strategies have been developed to defeat them fairly consistently, some people just plain suck at blitzball. Definitely not me though, I am amazing at blitzball. Haha, ha. Fucking blitz lost, but someone scored a fucking goal. I can't believe I went 3.5 minutes into overtime. Fuck you. Many years ago, there wasn't that much of a difference between winning blitzball and losing blitzball, at least for new runners. If you were lucky enough to win, you would simply go back 2 spaces to put down the strength sphere for Tidus for an extra damage boost, starting at the Sinspawn Gui fight. Tidus was chosen because he's fast and can easily enter orange sphere grid in order to gain some big stat boosts to make him a hard-hitting speedster to take care of a handful of bosses in the mid-game. Even now, that still holds true, as Tidus is the main damage dealer for Extractor, Seymour and Anima, Wendigo, and Evere. Over the years, major changes to the endgame strategies caused a ripple effect and altered how runners develop the sphere grid and defeat bosses. You see, in the past, once runners reached the Calmlands late into the game, they would get a chocobo and ride all the way to Remium Temple in order to complete a minigame for a chest containing 30 wings to discovery. By having Rikku mix 2 wings to discovery together, the party gains a status effect called Trio of 9999. This effect makes all attacks deal at least 9,999 damage, and all healing heal for at least 9,999 health. This second effect is useless in a speedrun, but this first effect is the broken part. A single hit for a 9,999 damage isn't all that impressive. What really breaks this effect are attacks that have multiple hits. If you use Lulu's Overdrive with Trio of 9,999, you can easily get more than 50,000 damage in a single turn, even without any sphere grid development on Lulu, which is a large factor in how speedrunners complete no sphere grid speedruns. For regular any percent runs though, having to charge up Lulu's Overdrive is a massive waste of time. Plus, Lulu alone just doesn't deal enough damage against a handful of bosses. So, what ended up being the solution? Bribery. Okay, not quite, but bribery is related. Bribe is a skill found deep in Rikku's sphere grid. By treating the enemies like your local politician and giving them a lot of money, you can force an enemy to leave the field and drop a bunch of items depending on how much money you've given them. Rikku can't get enough levels to reach bribe in a speedrun, but Lulu can by simply unlocking the level 2 lock behind her sphere grid. By giving all of their money to a fire flan found on the Calmlands, runners got a boatload of fire gems, which are obscenely helpful when combined with Trio of 9,999. Each gem deals 5 separate attacks that randomly target enemies, so runners would deal 49,995 damage per fire gem tossed. Now you may be wondering what all of this has to do with Biran and Yenke, especially since Kimahri is alone, so you can't even use Trio of 9,999 in that fight. It's simple. Speedruns in general follow a very simple principle, and Final Fantasy X is no different. That principle is, fuck them up before they can fuck you up. By this point in the speedrun, the entire party is hilariously underleveled with no one breaking 2000 HP, so survivability is a massive concern. Thankfully, Biran and Yenke drop a special item called the Return Sphere. A Return Sphere is used to warp a character back to any node that they've already activated, which is helpful for backtracking after hitting a dead end. In the case of a speedrun, that's not too special, but there is another much better use for them. By customizing a weapon with a Return Sphere, you can get an ability called First Strike on it, which effectively gives a character an extra turn at the start of battle, letting them outspeed all enemies that don't have First Strike themselves, or who ambush the party. Tidus already has First Strike by this point, as Zawaka sells a weapon called the Sonic Steel all the way back in Macalania Woods. But Rikku and Kimahri both need a Return Sphere each to learn this ability. The Biran and Yenke fight itself is hilariously easy to beat as their health scales off of Kimahri's strength and magic. Since there is no reason whatsoever to give Kimahri any strength or magic, the two of them have the lowest HP possible, so runners just threw 2 sleeping powders to end the fight, and depending on RNG, they would either get 2 Return Spheres, 1 Return Sphere and 1 Friend Sphere, or 2 Friend Spheres. Biran and Yenke each have a 7 and 8 chance of dropping Return Spheres, so the chances of getting at least 1 Return Sphere is really high. Getting only 1 Return Sphere wasn't an issue, as an upcoming boss, Sanctuary Keeper, drops Return Spheres too, so Kimahri would simply learn First Strike a bit later and the route would fix itself. Friend Spheres meanwhile were bad for the speedrun, but thankfully Biran and Yenke each only have a 1 in 8 chance of dropping a Friend Sphere. On the off chance that runners got the 1 in 64 chance of 2 Friend Spheres, then well, have fun. Strategies were developed for dealing with this, but there weren't any particularly elegant solutions, so runners really didn't want to get hit by it. During this period, Yuna was used as a caster, learning spells like Waterga and Dandaga to help the party in a few fights and solo all her Aeons in the final boss rush. Sometime in 2019 though, runners came to a realization and it completely changed the trajectory of FF10 speedrunning. And it's that one of Yuna's Aeons, Bahamut, is really strong. There is a 9,999 damage limit in place, which severely limits the damage players can dish out throughout the game. Players can break this damage cap by getting a skill called Break Damage Limit, but it's unreasonably slow to get this in a speedrun setting, on top of the stats needed to even break the damage limit in the first place. While all of this is unreasonable for party members, Bahamut naturally comes with the skill and can even hit the true damage cap of 99,999 in a speedrun setting. Of course, Bahamut isn't this strong out of the box, otherwise it would just completely ruin any semblance of balance this game ever had. Bahamut's stats, just like all of Yuna's Aeons, scale off of Yuna's own stats. Every Aeon's stats scale differently. For example, Bahamut's strength is equal to 1.6 times Yuna's strength, plus 1/7 of Yuna's total stats combined, but with HP divided by 100, MP divided by 10, and ignoring luck. Man, I think this is the 3rd time I've explained this now. I'm starting to sound like a broken record. Ignoring luck. Ignoring luck. Ignoring luck. This 1.6 times multiplier is a big part of why Bahamut can pump out so much damage in the speedrun. Bahamut needs to hit some very high strength and agility thresholds, but Yuna's own stat grid is pretty bad, so she needs to travel all over the sphere grid in order to collect a lot of stats. However, she only has so many levels to work with, so how do runners get all these stats? Teleport spheres, Return Spheres, and Friend Spheres. Hey, 2 of those sound familiar. Runners get 2 teleport spheres from a chest in Bikanel Desert, which was blocked off by Sandra Gore. These let a character warp to any space that any character has unlocked, so runners would simply have Auron take a detour to Waka's grid, unlock a magic node, and have Yuna warp there for some extra stats. There's also a Friend Sphere in Home that runners need to get if they lost Blitzball. Remember that Strength Sphere that went into Tidus' grid? Well, instead of hogging it all for himself, Tidus now needs to share it with his girlfriend, but putting it in his own grid which is full of weak stats isn't helpful. So this was moved into orange grid together with all of his other powerful stats for easy access. Now is where things get tricky. I explicitly said that runners get an extra friend sphere in home when they lose blitzball. Friend spheres are used to warp directly to another ally on the board. This is a very powerful sphere, but the detour is too slow, and all this friend sphere does is get an extra 4 strength for Yuna to make up for missing out on the strength sphere. The time required is not worth it if runners win blitzball, so the sphere gridding changes, and unlike with old blitz win and blitz loss strategies, the differences between boss strategies and sphere gridding are now a lot bigger. After defeating Isaru in Via Purifico, runners have 2 different sphere grids to follow depending on whether they won blitzball or lost blitzball. Runners who won blitzball would simply use their last teleport sphere to teleport Yuna to the strength sphere from blitzball, and start heading in Tidus' direction, heading deeper and deeper into orange grid. Runners who lost blitzball would instead use the teleport sphere to travel to a straggling strength node Tidus collected, and then use the friend sphere to warp to Tidus, then head backwards through orange grid. These 2 pathways aren't a big deal to memorize, but combined with Biran and Yenke, the sphere gridding becomes much more complicated. Remember those return spheres and friend spheres from Biran and Yenke? Well, now Yuna needs them, but 2 spheres simply isn't enough. There's a mechanic in this game called overkill. Every boss and enemy in this game has some hidden damage amount, and if the last attack that killed the enemy deals at least that much damage, then you get an overkill. Against bosses, the overkill gives you 50% more AP and double item drops, not counting equipment. Instead of defeating Biran and Yenke with 2 sleeping powers, they are now defeated with 2 gem items. This means that instead of 2 return spheres, 1 of each, or 2 friend spheres, the drops instead become 4 return spheres, 2 of each, or 4 friend spheres. Each set of spheres has a different way of doing the sphere gridding, and Yuna's gridding changes based on whether runners won or lost blitzball. Yuna needs to warp to Lulu, who travels deep into Riku's grid, and then depending on the situation, she needs to warp to either Kamari near the start of Riku's grid, or unlock fire with a black magic sphere and head into Riku's grid from the middle. For example, if runners got 4 return spheres and lost blitzball, they would need to continue backwards through orange path with 2 return spheres and 2 friend spheres. Runners would do the same, but they can immediately warp over to Lulu, then they would do the same blitzball already added to that advantage, then warp over to Lulu's path, but then use the block magic sphere to unlock fire from all of the grid and start working their way all we have left are you and Riku's grid near Kamari. Did you catch all of that? Good, because this will all be on the test. It's worth 90% of your grade, so you better study. To make matters worse, a handful of boss fights change ever so slightly in order to accommodate for differences in stats depending on the route. Not particularly major changes, there's a few extra hits from Yuna against Seymour Flux at the top of Mount Gagazet and an extra armor break from Tidus against Sanctuary Keeper. Though with the different strategies, different party compositions are needed, so it is also very easy for runners to screw themselves over if they brought the wrong party into a fight. On the bright side of all of this, the 1.6% chance of 4 friend spheres no longer loses a lot of time. In exchange, this is now the fastest pattern to get, while the most common pattern of 4 return spheres is the slowest pattern. Someone must have gotten the friend spheres 1 too many times and made a wish on a monkey paw, but oh well, such is the nature of speedrunning. If you're interested in more speedrunning content, be sure to click on the video on the screen.